Tetris is a game that I am very familiar with, but I mean, from way back in the day, I've played many, many hours of Tetris, and you can't forget the music. It was so simple back then too. Like it wasn't, playing it on the old school Game Boy. It was really quite clever the way they had programmed a lot of the games back then, especially like anything. I mean, it's Nintendo, right? So they always do a good job with music, but you're so limited as far as the actual memory that's available in the Game Boy that there are certain workarounds that you have to actually pull off. It depends. Tetris is simple enough, though. It's a pretty straightforward idea, but it works. Like, that's why it works, right? And so this was interesting. I haven't seen the movie, the sort of documentary movie about it. But it's probably pretty interesting, though. Most stuff, I always enjoy watching those types of things. I will spend, a lot of time looking up some explanations and retrospectives, and on YouTube you can find a retrospective for pretty much any game that you can think of, and it's always very fun because some of them go really, really in depth and bring all kinds of information about the companies, the people before the game, and how they decided to make the game, and then all the way through. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of stuff that you don't realize, but of course it makes sense. And something as popular and successful as Tetris, I mean, there's bound to be some interest. It's always a lot of work, but then a little bit of luck too, a little bit of like the right circumstances being there, and then something cool happens. But this should be interesting. AESPA, I'm realizing now they actually do a lot of these, sort of like licensed projects. The Pokemon, and then also this Tetris one, and they get a lot of opportunities this way, and that's pretty cool. I mean, they're if you look at the discography, and there's some EPs and then some single releases, and I know that they're like a fourth gen group, so they're had a much more recent start, but then it starts to kind of fill in. It makes more sense when you realize that they've done all of these other songs and worked on these other projects, and that's it's pretty cool though. It's and I wonder how it works, right? Because if it's for a movie, oftentimes the licensing rights, are made so that perhaps they get paid like upfront for, as a work for hire type of deal. Of course, when you're like a renowned artist, then you can probably make a pretty good amount, as opposed to maybe your typical session musician or something like that. Or if there's some sort of, licensing deal worked out to where there's royalties. And I don't know. I don't know how it works. But even that side would be pretty interesting to understand. So this is the Hold On Tight single from the Tetris motion picture soundtrack, and I think it should be interesting. The AESPA always delivers on vocals for sure, and their SM, the type of mixes and arrangements that come from the company are always very good too. So let's see what they managed to do with Hold On Tight for this movie.
It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
Baby, you and me, our twist of fantasy. Buckle up and take a seat. Hold on tight. Situation critical. Let's have a million blocks but somehow I know we're meant to be. I know. This world's a battlefield, I will be a shield. We got something real worth disrupting the peace. Let's disrupt the peace. Yeah, keep on moving. Beat the system, autopilot cruising. Generation victory, no losing. Heaven knows this won't have a fall. Better hold on tight, better hold on tight. Fought your life. Baby, you and me are a twisted fantasy, but it's running on a dream all night. Wired differently, a chaotic energy. Buckle up and take a seat, hold on tight. Fought your life. Baby, you and me are a twisted fantasy, but it's running on a dream all night. Wired differently, a chaotic energy. Buckle up and take a seat, hold on tight. La 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 la. Hold on tight. La 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 la. Hold on tight.
It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
So the Tetris theme is, of course, it has a very great melody. Of course, this is taken from Russian composition, right? And when you get to about the Romantic period, there's actually a lot of really complex music that comes from Russian composers. Not just Russian, but a lot of those sort of Eastern European countries as well, like Hungary, and it's good. I mean, it's the thing that's interesting about it is that it's actually quite simple. If you compared it to Rachmaninoff or something, I mean, like some of those guys wrote things that were like wildly complex, and it's really like subtle things, small details that are worked in. If you can whittle it down to what the chord progression essentially is, then it becomes like much more obvious, and you go, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. All these crazy symbols on the page are like confusing. But this piece in particular is so simple, right? It has like almost like a folky type of feel to it, and I think that's what gives it most of its universal appeal. Of course, being like in a minor key, it has this like a bit of a mysterious, type of vibe to it. And I think that they used that to a very, very good advantage with this song, right? They took that main theme sort of melody and used it for the chorus section. A really nice touch is these strings that are actually doubling that same melody line, sort of right under the vocals. That sound just works. Like this melody, it's absolutely perfect for a string sound. The texture of it, you know what I mean? Like with this type of melody line, it's very, very nice, man. It's really nice. The electronic sounds that are used also in this like techno style type of sound that is incorporated into this is also like really, really geared towards that 8-bit like sound, and it's like bit crushed at times, and they do interesting things with the production on it to kind of ramping the compression and things, and it sort of gives it some color, like changes it up from and along the course of a phrase too. It's not like it's one way, one playthrough, or one phrase and then a different way. It's like it occurs about halfway through, so it's actually gets pretty interesting, but it's still kept pretty simple. You know what I mean? Like this is not overly complicated, and that's what makes it so much fun, right? The recognition through familiarity with the game, and then just taking what works and building on top of it. And there's a similar concept to what the game actually is, right? Because in Tetris, you're stacking those block pieces and trying to make that line, right? You're trying to create a foundation, and this song, actually, the arrangement does a similar thing in how it, starts off with a lighter sound, and then moving into the next section, it will have more body, and then by the time you get to the chorus section, you have like all this bass sound and everything. So it is basically stacking across the different sections into making like a bigger, fuller sound. But it's measured, right? It has very, very finite dimensions too, which is also plays on the concept, because the shapes are very deliberate, right? Like they're very you can take the little shape in Tetris and turn it, rotate it, right? But you can't actually restructure it. You can't like move one of the blocks over and then move one, like you can't do that. The pieces have to fit with their actual shape into some space there. And so a lot of these ideas definitely carried over into this song and how it's written and how it's actually arranged. It's not bad, man. Like it's pretty good. You have to be very economical with it, and you got to be in other words, keep it simple, right? Like you have that's even this sort of idea about Tetris. It's actually very straightforward and simple. It can get complicated, right? Like sometimes you're trying to clear the stage or the level, and it depending on how fast it's going, right? But this keeps an even tempo and then builds off of some very simple and accessible ideas to create something that it has this sort of ebb and flow, right? It sort of tapers down and then it fills out, and it's very cool. I actually dig AESPA's vocal melodies on such a deliberately measured kind of tempo, like in the standard songs, there's a lot of, it'll speed up and then it'll slow down, and then sometimes the rhythm becomes more intense because of perhaps the verse section calls for it, or something like that. The dynamics shift up a lot. There's like that peak of the song, but this is very even actually, and it's nice to hear that more melodic and drawn out, sustained type of sound.
It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
So obviously some movie audio. So there's the vocal line that's going on. There is a chiptune type of melody that's doubled there. And then there's also like organ chords. It could be like synth organ, not actually like a real played organ instrument sound. The compression on it's pretty heavy, like it's even on the vocal, and it does kind of lift a little bit towards the end of it, but it stays pretty intense throughout that whole thing. So when you hear the organ sound, especially, that's a very tight envelope on it. It doesn't have all the airiness that like an instrumental recording would have if it was an actual organ being played.
Situation critical, let's have it. Million blocks of obstacles, you help me. See a different POV, giving back on my faith in a catastrophe. It's alright, keep on.
That's what's interesting about that is that it's a single chord, like that. techno bass that's going on underneath it, right? That's lets you know where the root of the chord is sitting, and it never moves, right? Like that entire, they jump up, so they're probably hitting like the seventh of the chord when it goes up, right? That's pushing up towards that sort of seventh interval, but the chord actually doesn't even change here. Now we have a chord change. Bit crush. So what it did right there was it moved from the one chord and then actually started to use the chord progression that occurs underneath that main melody, right? So you can feel it, like you know it's coming, you know what I mean? And the vocal melody like stays pretty close to it, but doesn't actually invoke it yet. Like they don't actually go for the melody there, but the bass voice is carrying the same progression, and you can feel those shifts, you can feel them. And it was actually really cool the way that, like, you know, the bit crush like really gets strong towards it was getting like super crunchy at the end, you know. The sort of like strain of the early computer systems, right, to when you're working with like limited memory, and it like a minor key is always going to have a little bit of that dissonance and a little bit of that tension in it, more so than like a major key. But having an effect like that actually reinforces it really well. So it's really good use of that. And again, these the lower tempo, right? So like our beat values are, there's a pretty fine balance. You want to be economical with it, but you don't want to get boring either. But this is like right at a sweet spot, pretty much.
Baby, you and me are a twisted fantasy, bodies running on a dream all night. Wired differently, a chaotic energy. Buckle up and take a seat, hold on tight.
So you've got the some percussion that comes in now, right? Like some pretty electronic sounding percussion, but it's good. It's kind of narrow as well, like the compression on it, the envelope on it's very tight. But then you have that synth bass that's going on, that's a little bit stronger, like the dynamic on it rose slightly. And there is that organ sound that's going on towards the beginning, and then you have the vocal melody line that's going over it. As it nears the end of this, right, that second phrase, right, that's when the string sound starts to enter, and it's dynamically rising in level, and also the pitch value on it is going up as it goes along. So it creates this very like cutting, almost laser like sound through there, and it's very, very rich, and such like the frequency of that's really fast, right? It's like, and the bass frequency is of course a big undulating sweeping kind of a thing. So it's it makes it like this very cool feel, right, when you have like this very, very big heavy bass on the bottom. And the vocal melody line is actually quite airy. Like they're not projecting this full body tone, right? It's almost like there's a little bit of breathiness to it. I feel like it's being whispered or something, like it's a little bit mysterious in the delivery, in the expression of it. And a lot of this hot color is in the string sound, and it builds up to a really nice peak, and that's that, the bass, the organ, the vocal, and then this string sound comes in and starts to cut like over the top of everything. So that's your stacking, that's your pieces falling there and creating this big full sound. It's very cool.
We were built to be two enemies. I know, but somehow I know we're meant to be. I know. This world's a battlefield. I will be a shield. We got something real worth disrupting the peace. Let's drop the peace. Yeah, keep up.
Again, there was a big percussion hit at the end of that hook phrase, and all this like swirling reverberation off of it. The reverb off of that kind of spilled into this rising like resonance sound, and you started off with the vocal being the biggest thing in the mix, and then some of that synth organ coming back in with the chord progression, and then you get that bass coming in, right? Just playing a downbeat, a root sound. So again, it's like introducing one piece and then another piece and then another piece and another. This whole composition is structured to build like that as it goes through the different sections.
Moving with the system autopilot cruising to no vision, victory, no losing. Heaven knows this won't help, but hold on tight. Fight ya.
So they're like the vocal melody is doing the eighth note subdivisions, right? So this is giving you your upbeats, but they're also they're grouped in a way that almost feels like triplets, but it could just be like laying back on the beat a little bit, because it starts to capture. But I wouldn't know for sure unless I saw like the transcriptions if that's actually a triplet group or not, because it's so close. It's so close to being a straightforward like 1 and 2 and count. And I think what they're doing is they're intentionally laying back on the beat just a little bit to give it some pull. Like you hear it and you want it to come at the eighth note. You want that upbeat to be there, and it is in the bass and in the percussion that's going on. You can really feel it there. So what your ear wants to do is line up the vocal rhythm with that, but they're laying back on the beat just a little bit, and I think it gives it this light swing feel. It was a nice rhythmic and pitch change up too, moving into this second verse. Like they went a different direction with it, which gave a nice variation between the first verse and this verse.
You like it? Baby, you and me are just a fantasy, but it's running on a dream all night. Wired differently, a chaotic energy. Buckle up and take a seat, hold on tight. But you like it? Baby, you and me are just a fantasy, but it's running on a dream all night. Wired differently, a chaotic energy. Buckle up and take a seat, hold on tight. La 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 la. Hold on tight. La 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 la. Hold on tight.
It was a great finish, like that last phrase on it, because it totally left really the sort of digital sound. And I mean, because it's there in the hook, right, in that chorus section that's going on, and it's a sort of balance where the lower end has a lot of the electronic digital sound, and then of course the vocals and the strings that are going on over the top, right? But the last phrases there, right, when they start to invoke just the la 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 la, what you have is an entirely symphonic arrangement. The vocals there, the strings are there at first, and then you get like symphonic bass sounds that come in, right? And it's definitely like some low strings, right? Some cello stuff, maybe some of the brass too, like bass brass that's in there, but it's actually like very soft. It's really, really delicate, right? So you hear this warm, and it is so round, and it just has a great like. It works so well because it's like originally, you know, a sort of classical composition. Like it was made to be played on that type of arrangement, and so it has a wonderfully organic feel to it at the end. And this is so measured. What I've noticed with with this piece in particular, is the vocal delivery on it is very, very measured, right? Like the verse probably has the most fun. Like there's the most pitch changes, some peaks that are here and there, variations on the actual melody lines. When it comes to the chorus and the hook, though, it's like very, very deliberate. There's a certain sound, there's a certain rhythm that everything has to fit into, all informed by the theme. But their delivery has to be like very, very measured, right? It has to stay in a certain range. And it's interesting, right? It adds to the tension again, because it's like you want them to just like, you want aespa to just like really belt it out, but they're like holding it back, you know what I mean, intentionally. And it just adds to the atmosphere, to the vibe. And it's again, it's a great theme to use and to really lay into that sort of darker, space, right? Like it's a clever use of it, man. It really is. It really is. And it's like the Tetris theme is so universally, liked, and everybody can identify with it quickly. Even people who, it's kind of like the Super Mario Brothers theme. There are people who have probably never sat down to play a Mario game, but if they hear the theme song, they go, oh, it's Super Mario, right? And this has like that same kind of appeal, Tetris, right? Like it'll do this. Even somebody who's like, no, I never played the old Tetris game, but if they hear this sound, they know that it's from Tetris. And so the choice to use it as a sample, but it isn't really just a sample, because the progression comes back in the bass voice throughout. Like it's in the verse, sort of alluding to and strongly suggesting the return of the theme in the chorus section. So it actually informs like most of this composition, because even your melody line, even your vocal melody lines have to be written across the same progression. Like it has to work in the same range as far as the pitch values go. So it isn't really just a sample; it's the basis for the entire composition, and it's done really well. I especially like the finish on this. Just and as I'm watching the sort of visual here, like the video representation, when you're in the song, right, and of course it's cutting with little clips from the movie and stuff like that, but the sort of game visuals, right, the shapes, everything is all up front. Like it's framed in a way that you're entirely within the game space. And now what we're doing is we're like trucking out of this shot, and it's really suggesting like, that there's the monitor, that there's separation now. Whereas in the bit crushed digital sort of techno vibe of the verse and the chorus section, right, throughout the song, it's right in your face. Like it's like you're in that space. And now as it's trucking out and giving you this visual of like the monitor, and that last section is moving out of the electronic sound, out of the digital sound, into instrumental sounds now, into a symphonic type of arrangement here. It's reinforcing that separation, right? Like, okay, now you're not in the game. Now you're back in real life, right? And you're in the sort of tangible, tactile world and everything. And so it's actually really cool, man. But it sounds incredible once that symphonic bass starts to take over, right? That's just a really amazing sound. But it's very, very well done in the throughout the song, in the verse section and chorus section, incorporating the electronic sounds as well. Not just like the sort of stock sound, but also the production treatment on it shifting the compression, bringing in that very bit crushed feel, right? Especially to the bass, it becomes very chunky and very blocky, and very, very appropriate for the song, for the concept, for the theme, right? For the fact that it's based on Tetris.
It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
It's fun. It's fun. It's the movie's very, so not one of those like documentary type of things. It's actually there's a screenplay and a script, and it's presenting the story in a movie as opposed to being a documentary that just explains everything. So that's an interesting take on it too. But it's probably pretty good, still. It'd be interesting to watch because they got to also strike a balance between what is factually true in the background of it, in the history, and then the way that it's portrayed in the movie. And so this song ends up being like a pretty good representation of that. It's fairly effective in that because it's invoking a lot of the same things and having a mixture of the vocal and instrumental sounds, and then a lot of electronic sounds. And it's a very, very smart use of space. It's very chill, but at the same time, it has a great amount of that tension in it as well. So it's not like super hyped or whatever. It's actually pretty laid back, again, because of the tempo, right? Like it's very deliberate, very measured, a lot of space, a lot of those big reverberations off of the percussion hits and things. That really emphasizes, that idea of space. In fact, that big, was at the end of the first chorus, that big percussion hit, and then it goes into that sort of swirling reverberation and everything. That's like when you clear the Tetris game space, right? You drop that piece and it's like boom, and everything just kind of like clears out. It because it's empty space. It's like all the blocks are gone, so you reset back to, okay, now I have to start stacking the blocks again. It's very well done, actually. It like simple, keeping it simple, but always getting a lot of value towards expressing the concept, right? And it's pretty well done. And AESPA sounds great. The vocal harmonies for the chorus, those are really nice. It's a very rich chorus sound, and it's actually very tight in between like the vocal harmonies and what the strings and some of that organ rhythm are playing. So there's like one really sort of interlaces with the other, and then there's the biggest amount of separation with what's going on in the bass, but it still sounds very cool. And they have some really nice melodies in the verse sections as well. It's fun though. It's fun. It was a good choice. You know what I mean? Like for the to do the song. It's a good group to go with. I always find it fascinating how they can, because this kind of stuff shows you, right? When you, it's not the K-pop standard sort of track or that song structure. It's like, if we give you something that's really based on conventional voice leading, sort of classical composition, but they can just as capably perform with that type of piece of music. And so it's these are always really, really cool examples of that. The Pokemon theme also, that OST that they did for the Pokemon, that was really great, man. You know what I mean? It just like totally stepping away from the normal thing and then getting to do something that requires all different types of delivery, just a different approach in vocals in general, different requirements as far as like the harmonizations, but you see how they're able to adapt to that as well, and equally perform it, just as well. So it's very fun. It's very cool. I don't know. I'll see if I can find the movie. I think it would be interesting to watch too. But that was a very great example of using the theme to sort of create another track. And it is, in the technical sense, it is used as a sample. It's in there. The audio bit is taken and then put into the mix, incorporated the way a sample would be. But it's also to acknowledge that the chord progression is based on the same theme. It's the entire structure of this song, from the bass all the way to the melody lines. So a very smart, an example of a very smart way of taking a theme like that and actually, making a full composition based on on just that main theme, right? It's a very, very good use of the idea, for sure. AESPA, Hold On Tight. It's fun when they do just these seemingly random other side projects, and it's a great way to just hear more and just hear variation and just hear them do something a little bit different. But it's always cool. It's always cool.